You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to episode 134 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Chad Melbourne joined by Casey Abrams today. No Harper Cody. It's his little brother's birthday today, so he's got to go celebrate with the kid. And by the way, that kid might be leading the multiple scoregasms in scoring this upcoming weekend at the Pepsi Cup. So we're going to get into this episode here. We're going to talk about the Matt Kachuk trade, get our reactions to that. We're going to go through some of the winners of the offseason so far here on July 25th, about middle of the off season. But before we do that, Casey, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Really excited for this weekend coming up. Emerson's going to have a little competition in the scoring race on our team because I am just going for goals this year, and pretty pumped that I got my Boys in the Booth merch just in time for the tournament. am not just pumping our own tires because it's our stuff, but it actually all fits so well.
I know.
And I love the look of the stuff. It's all retro. It's honestly awesome. So really pumped at how that turned out.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm wearing my Fantasy Corner shirt right now, and this is probably my favorite one. I just love the colors. I love the blues and the teals and whatnot. That's the color of our logo. I've got the Seattle jersey behind me. That's what I do for my team in the Pepsi Cup every year. So love the colors on this. Fits really nicely, and you can still get your hands on some Boys in the Booth merch at boysinthebooth.com. Head there right now, and yeah, you can get some. But I'm excited for the weekend, dude. I think this week we'll hopefully do another episode where we can get the captains to talk about, who they think the best team is and who they think is going to score the most goals and be the best goalie and whatever, and make some predictions. So that should be fun too. But overall, this weekend is what I look forward to every summer. Just playing in the ball hockey tournament. I'm going to be playing hard D this year. And it's just going to be super exciting. Huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring the podcast. SeatGeek is a ticket app that takes all the confusion out of buying tickets. SeatGeek makes it extremely simple to buy tickets to all of your favorite sporting events, including Jays and Leafs games, and you can always find a great deal. On SeatGeek, all tickets are scored on a scale between 0 and 10, so you know if you're getting a good or a bad deal. Green is good and red is bad. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. So click the link in the description to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek. Summer is here, and you know what that means. Extreme sports like spike ball and road hockey have returned, and so is day drinking. The problem is we're not as young as we used to be, and these summer activities can be draining on our bodies. When you push your body hard or just feel run down, it's extremely important to stay hydrated. When you make hydration a priority, it helps you feel healthier on a day-to-day basis. Enter Liquid IV. Whether you're playing sports or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. One stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. It contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients, non-GMO, and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. The kicker? This stuff tastes good too, guys. Liquid IV has incredible hydration flavors like watermelon, strawberry, pina colada, and more, but my personal favorite is lemon lime. So get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth in all caps at checkout. So that's 25% off anything when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth, all caps at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today at liquidiv.com. Shout out to Cocktail Bomb Shop for sponsoring the podcast. Cocktail Bomb Shop is a Canadian woman-owned small business, and all of their cocktail bombs are proudly handmade in Montreal. Well, what is it and how does it work? Step 1, you pick your favorite flavor of cocktail bomb and unwrap it. My favorite is definitely mojito. Step 2, drop your cocktail bomb into 8 ounces of sparkling water and watch it fizz for 5 minutes. Step 3, add a shot of your favorite alcohol, some ice, and enjoy. Fellas, gents, boyfriends of the world, these cocktail bombs make the perfect gift for your lady friend because not only are they tasty, but they're Instagrammable as well. Right now, if you go to cocktailbombshop.ca and use the code BITV15, you can get 15% off your entire order. That's cocktailbombshop.ca. Use the code BITV15 at checkout for 15% off. Okay, let's get into the episode now. We want to start talking about Matt Tkachuk because obviously that was the insane news that happened just a couple of days ago, and we haven't really given our full reaction on it other than my quick story post as it broke at around midnight. I think it was Friday night. And so anyway, here's the deal. Matthew Tkachuk goes to the Florida Panthers with a conditional 2025 fourth-round pick. And in exchange, Calgary receives Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, Cole Schwindt, and a conditional 2025 first-round pick that's lottery protected. So, Case, what were your initial thoughts to the deal?
Well, you broke the trade to me via text, and I don't know what I was doing Friday night, but I was busy doing something, and I saw your text, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I couldn't believe the amount of stuff going Calgary's way. And I was like, well, what else is Calgary sending to Florida? Oh, nothing at all. A fourth round conditional pick. It actually blew my mind. And my initial reaction to this trade is like baffled. I couldn't believe it at all. But the more and more I start to think about it, like, I really don't know where I stand on this trade at all. I think it's all going to come down to what Calgary does with Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar next year. If they can sign them long term, if they can get them at a good contract, then they're walking away laughing with this deal. Like, I thought that Calgary, when they lost Gaudreau and we're starting to hear that Kachuk was going to walk, we were saying, how can you start rebuilding with this back end and with an all-star goalie, like you said in text, locked up long term for cheap? It's like, how do you start rebuilding now? And we were starting to get worried about Calgary, but with this return, it's like, oh, they're back in the conversation for playoff contending and cup contending, really, in my mind.
Yeah, like, my initial thought to the trade, Case, as you know, kind of on the same page with you. Like, it was just shock and awe because. And actually, I guess before we get into that, I should add a few things about the trade that I didn't include right away for anybody who's been living under a rock here. Matthew Tkachuk was immediately extended to an 8-year deal at $9.5 per. So that was basically included in the deal. They wouldn't have done the deal if they weren't getting Kachuk to sign. Both Huberdeau and Weegar are UFAs after this upcoming season. So Huberdeau right now makes 5.9, and he's done at the end of this year. He's going to need a new deal. And Mackenzie Weegar, one of the, probably a top 15 defenseman in the NHL, I would say. I don't think that's crazy to say. Makes 3.25 for one more year. He's going to need a new deal at the end of the season. Both guys, though, have already said to the media that they're open to staying in Calgary. So I totally agree. Like, this deal could look even better for Calgary if these guys end up re-signing. But yeah, so that was my initial thought. I was like, Huberdeau, personally, I think is almost as good as Kachuk, maybe as good, could be better, depending on who you ask or in what kind of circumstance. And then Weegar, like a top 15 defenseman. And, you get all of this boatload, including that first round pick for Matt Kachuk, a guy who literally told the team that he wasn't going to play for them anymore. So I don't understand where the leverage came from Brad Treliving, but what a deal this is. And like, this is probably, like, I don't know if this is a shock to say, Case, and like, tell me if you agree or not, but this might be the biggest trade of the salary cap era.
I don't know. I'd have to look back. That's pretty scary to get behind right away, but it's huge. It's like, it definitely tops the 1-for-1 trade in my mind, like instantly, even though that was franchise altering for my team. But this thing's huge, man. Florida, I don't like the Florida Panthers at all anymore. They just traded my two favorite players off of that team. I'm huge on both of these guys. Like, Huberdeau has been, sneakily one of my favorite forwards in the league the last 5 years. And Mackenzie Weegar is like my second favorite defenseman in the entire league. So that was just baffling to me. And man, just think about like a culture shift in Calgary and like the mindset of all these other players on their team. Like the last 3 years has all been talks about, you know, Gaudreau's not going to stick around. They need to make a big change up to make an impact in the playoffs. There needs to be a change. Are they going to be a playoff team? It's all negative stuff coming out of there, including like salary talks with Kachuk. So it was like getting rid of those two players. Obviously you wanted something in return for Johnny Gaudreau, but being able to replace them with the second best passing forward in the NHL today, as well as a hard-nosed, all-around defenseman in Uyghur, I think they're laughing right now. And I think that this team is back. They're back already. And they have $36 million to work with next year. That's their projected cap space. The guys that they have to sign are Huberdeau, Milan Lucic, which is dropping from a $5.25 million contract. Trevor Lewis, Mangiapane is getting re-signed this year. Mackenzie Weegar, Valimaki, they're not too worried about what they're going to be doing with that $36 million, even if it's going to be, $11 million for Huberdeau.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that. Coming off a contract at 5.9, that boy is going to get paid. The reason I said it could be the biggest deal in like the biggest blockbuster trade in the salary cap era is because both of these players had over 100 points last season.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a trade, at least I can't think of it off the top of my mind, where two players who scored 100 points were traded for each other plus on each side, So and so I wanted to get into that. At the end of this talk, I wanted to give grades to each team just quickly, because I know that's fun and you love that. That's your favorite thing to do. That's sarcasm. But I wanted to ask, like, if this deal were a 1-for-1, if you're Calgary, do you accept it? And if you're Florida, do you accept it? If this deal was a 1-for-1, and obviously the 1-for-1 being Huberdeau for Kachuk.
I think, again, it really matters about Huberdeau and if they're going to be able to sign him long term. But my initial reaction is I would not have took this trade if I were Florida. Mm-hmm. And I would be running to the bank if I were Calgary, because you already knew that Kachuk kind of wanted out of there. And I think that I'm so high on Huberdeau, and I'm really going to be interested to see for both of these guys the product of this change and their stats next year. Kachuk, we don't have the history of him scoring over 100 points. We don't have the history of him scoring over 80 points. And he played on that one hot line that was on fire all year long. Now, on the other side of it, Huberdeau, he's got the history, but he's also been playing with Barkov for, his whole career. So it's like, I'm interested to see what these guys can do with their new line mates and how it's going to turn out for them.
100%. And a guy like Huberdeau, like, how many times have we mentioned this? He broke the literal assist record in the NHL for left wingers this season, with 85. Like, and he's not even the biggest piece in the deal. I mean, according to like for value's sake, anyways, that would be Matthew Tkachuk. Yeah. So, and I'm just looking at the stats here because I thought I'd compare them, briefly as we talked about this. Last season, Huberdeau had 30 goals, 85 assists for 115 points, played, just over 19 minutes per game, roughly, and, controlled the chances for and against 55.7% of the time. That was his Corsi. Kachuk, on the other hand, 42 goals. So he's known to be more of a goal scorer, and we know that, than Huberdeau is. Huberdeau, like you said, is the incredible passer, maybe, top 2 or 3 in the league. And so Kachuk had 42 goals, 62 assists, 104 points, played, about a minute less, almost about 18 minutes a game. Kachuk did, and his Corsi was 59.3% all situations. So, very comparable. I'll say this though, Huberdeau clearly has shown over his career that he has more of an offensive outlook, and he's produced offensively more than Kachuk has. Kachuk, though, underrated two-way player, like one of the better two-way forwards in the league. So there's just a bit of a stylistic difference between the two. personally, I think these players are super close, like in terms of value, the more that I look at it. But the fact that Huberdeau was sent with Weegar and a first and a former third-round pick, to me, is just completely shocking.
Yeah. I mean, there's other things that you have to take into consideration here, like that unquantifiable trait of Kachuk and his shit disturbing and his physical play, and then also the fact that he's only 24 years old is huge for them as well. So there's a lot to go into this trade, but my last kind of comment on this one before we move on is to talk about PR or culture. And we're starting to see that it's kind of being a factor now. And it's starting to come out that, players don't want to sign with Vegas anymore because they just trade their players all willy-nilly. And the way they treat players is kind of a thing in Columbus for a while, although that's certainly changing now. Yeah. But Florida Panthers just traded their franchise leader in assists, games played, and points. I don't know if points is on there or not, but he didn't know that it was coming at all. Yeah. He actually thought the next phone call would be about contract extensions, and then he got the call that he was traded. And I just don't know if that's the way you should be treating your franchise best player.
Yeah, and man, I'm glad you brought that up, talking about Florida and the way they treat the best players who have ever played for them. Great place to play in terms of weather, but the organization hasn't exactly been, sunshine and roses to its players. And Exhibit A is Olli Jokinen. Do you remember a few years ago when his wife took to Twitter and mentioned that she returned to the BB&T Center for the first time, basically since Olli Jokinen had played for the team, and she noticed this there's a case, and Olli Jokinen's name was hardly mentioned. The fact that he was like their leading point scorer at the time, and maybe even goals too, and he gave so many seasons to the team, and in their trophy case on display, you could barely find Olli Jokinen's name. And it was like, what did he really mean to the city then if you're not even going to display your players? You go to the Scotiabank Arena downtown Toronto and you see Legends Row, right? You see statues of players. You go to Edmonton, you see Wayne Gretzky out front. You see the best players for that organization put on display. And Florida really now sort of is forming a track record of not appreciating their stgreat So I'm glad you brought that up.
Exactly. No, it's kind of damaging moving forward in my mind. Like, obviously people want to move there because it's a great place to play, and due to the weather and tax and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's like players are going to start taking notice to teams not treating them the way they should be, especially when they're superstars. But really, everyone should be treated well. So
100%. Last thing I'll say about this trade before we move on here to the winners of the offseason so far is it's just something that I posted in our group chat and was talking about. Mackenzie Weegar obviously is a big piece of this deal, but he hasn't been talked about quite as much as Huberdeau or Kachuk, because obviously those are the big names, and defensemen are sort of just always undervalued in terms of media attention unless you're Cale Makar. But man, Florida's back end is not scary anymore at all. After losing Weegar and after losing even a guy like Ben Sherratt, who they overpaid for at the deadline and got nothing in return for, their back end right now is essentially Aaron Ekblad on an island with a bunch of number 4 and number 5 guys. And that might be a bit disrespectful, but I think personally that's how I feel. Aaron Ekblad, Brandon Montour, Gustav Forsling, Radko Gudas, Lucas Carlson, Mark Stahl. Does that back end scare you at all? Doesn't scare me.
No, not at all. And I will say I like Gustav Forsling. He kind of showed that he could be a good pair out there with Weegar. His partner is now gone, so we'll see what he can do. But I'm assuming he's going to be playing with Ekblad. But yeah, that back end doesn't scare me at all. And on the flip side of it, Calgary's is moved up into a top 5 in my mind in the league.
For
like,
sure.
They're looking at Hanifin, Anderson, Mackenzie Weegar, Tanev, Shillington, and Zadorov. Like, I don't really want to play against that team at all. That's a lot of guys who can both move the puck and move bodies.
Every line, every pairing, it has at least one offensive weapon and a guy who can shut it down and make a good first pass. So that's
exactly.
Oh man, that back end is going to be scary for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into our winners of the offseason so far. How we did this is we basically just thought of, one or two teams who might have been on our radar who we thought have had pretty good off seasons. Because like we said, it's only July 25th here. We're only about halfway through the off season, if that, because free agency was late starting this year and everything was pushed back. So we're kind of just getting started. But so far, we have a few teams who we think have been doing well, making some good moves, and in our words, winning. So, Case, who's your number one team right now? Who's been winning the offseason, in your opinion?
Man, it's funny that I said that these guys won the draft, or at least were winners from the draft, and now I'm also going to say that they're kind of winning the offseason here, and that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Corey Morel right now is absolutely thrilled, you know that. But it mostly has to do with the one signing, and that's Johnny Gaudreau, getting him for 7 years and $9.75 million. Talk about image and culture and a team that's been struggling with that, in that they've been losing a lot of big players in the last decade, like Panarin walking and Officer Bob leaving, and then losing guys like Duchesne after making a big push for them. It's like, it seemed like pretty bleak in Columbus in terms of holding on to big names, but they just landed the big fish, and the guy left money on the table in multiple teams to go there. So that is saying a lot, and that is huge going forward. Not to mention the fact that instantly after, they were able to lock up Patrick Laine for 4 more years. And maybe the most impossible thing in this whole scenario is they've made Patrick Laine excited to play hockey. I didn't think anyone could do that. His quote here is, "I don't think I've ever been this excited to play hockey and maybe be able to play with this kind of guy." That's huge. And they got him for 4 years at $8.7 million, which compared to other guys signing in this league, that's pennies for a guy who can score 40 goals at will, especially playing with a guy like Johnny Gaudreau. I wouldn't be surprised if Laine could put up 50 this year, or at least come close to it. And then, they locked up Boqvist for 3 more years at $2.6 million. Huge ceiling on that guy. But then they had a couple weird moves for me.
Glad you're bringing it up. Bjorkstrand
wasn't very exciting for me. They didn't get a lot in return for a guy who could really put the puck in the net. He's known as the Devils killer. In 19 games, he has 12 goals against the Devils. I actually am scared every time he's on the ice. And then they signed Goodbranson for 4 years at $4 million. So those are 2 questionable moves, but it doesn't matter. Like, wipe that clean when you sign Johnny Gaudreau for that price.
100% Case, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Columbus was a team, that we talked about when we were talking about the draft. Like, I think I posted that reel of us talking about Columbus winning the draft, and I think I captioned it like they won the draft and the off season, because that was the day that Gaudreau signed. And so that makes up for some of the other moves, like getting the big fish. Like, I totally agree. That's incredible. It's incredible for the team, incredible for the culture, being able to get Laine done as well and getting him pumped to play. I think his quote, he said something like his hands were shaking, like getting ready to play, because he was so excited, right? And think about, honestly, like, and this is a bit unrelated, but think about guys like like Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers and Blake Wheeler. When Laine says that quote, "I'm excited to play with this kind of talent," it's like, Patrick, you were there and you didn't really like it, and now that's a slap in the face, considering they lost the PLD trade as well. So Winnipeg's just in shambles.
Well, you knew that was kind of a slap at the guys to Winnipeg, but we already heard all of the rumors about how they were in the dressing room and that they didn't get along. So it was like not a surprise at all to hear him say stuff like that.
100%. I'm glad you brought up the signing though of Goodbranson, because that, for me, that made no sense. They essentially chose Goodbranson over Bjorkstrand because they had to move Bjorkstrand's money out to accommodate the other signings once they already had Goodbranson done to his deal. And so that to me was a bit, is kind of poor asset management in my opinion. I didn't love the value that they got in return, especially considering like some of the other value plays that we've seen this year. But, overall, I tend to agree. Like, they had a pretty good offseason, and I'm excited to see what they look like on the ice, to be honest, because this team could do a lot.
Their center depth does not scare me in the slightest, but I am excited to see what this team could do. And don't get me wrong, like, Goodbranson's definitely a guy I would like to have on my team. He's huge. He plays well on his own end. He's like one of those guys that you'd want to pair with a young, kind of offensively gifted defenseman, like they did with Will Butcher and Ben Lovejoy back in the day, for an example. But put Goodbranson with Boqvist, although I believe they're both right-handed, so I don't know how that works out. But I want him on my team. $4 million for 4 more years at 30 years old. Don't think I want that, though.
Yeah, and I think at the time they did the deal, they probably didn't realize that they were going to be that close to signing Gaudreau. They probably didn't think that they would have to move money out after the fact. They probably thought, we can get a player who wants to play here for an extended period of time, which you've mentioned is a problem in Columbus, or was a problem. And they're like, listen, if we can get a guy, might have to overpay him a bit, but he's going to stay here and he's going to be serviceable, etc. So I didn't hate the deal when it was done. I thought clearly it was an overpayment, but Columbus is just looking to build it up as their young guys come through. So, and like you said, they actually needed to move cap after all of this, so they got rid of Bjorkstrand almost instantly after they went over the cap, and he kind of, I guess, was worked out of the top 6 wingers due to the moves. But I would have liked them to pick up a centerman, trading Bjorkstrand, and really kind of work on that center position, because they're struggling there. But all in all, Columbus has to be happy right now. Yeah, 100%. Okay, so the team that I'm going to pick so far that I think are one of the winners so far of the offseason are the team that traded for Oliver Bjorkstrand, and that's the team behind me, the Seattle Kraken. I think that was a move that made a ton of sense for Seattle, seeing an opportunity to pick up a guy for cheap value in terms of what he's probably worth around the league, because they saw a team like Columbus who was desperate to get money off the books. So I really liked that. Obviously we talked about their draft as well, and it seems like we're just talking about, 2 teams who have kind of transformed themselves this offseason through the draft and just through the moves they've made. But, they drafted Shane Wright 4th overall, and we can't, not talk about that in terms of their offseason moves, because that's franchise changing and perhaps even franchise defining, having Matty Beniers and Shane Wright down the middle for the next who knows how long. And then obviously Jagger Firkus, like we mentioned, Dumais as well, drafted. They had a great draft, so there's that. Then they went out and signed Andrei Burakovsky. Probably overpaid him a little bit, but that's a proven top 6 player on your team. And like we've talked about so many times, they didn't really have a ton of those. They had a lot of guys who, were scratching and clawing at a top 6 position, but no really bona fide scorers. And I think Burakovsky, along with Bjorkstrand, are 2 guys who can really help, make an impact in this team's top 6 that's now going to be loaded with, some guys like that who can score on the side, and then the younger guys who I just mentioned, Beniers and Shane Wright. So I think their forward group is looking way better than it was last year. Another move they did, they signed Martin Jones. Goalie depth, we know that was a problem in Seattle last year, so maybe that, we can see a bounce back from Martin Jones. But just overall, man, like, I look at this team compared to what they looked like last year, and their top 9 looks like this now. They've got Burakovsky, Beniers, Bjorkstrand, Schwartz, Wright, Eberle, McCann, Gord, and then Tanev or Donskoy, whoever you kind of want to put in there. And to me, I know there's still not a ton of high-end scoring on this team, but I can't not be high on this team now looking at this forward group compared to what it was last year.
Yeah, I kind of had them as an honorable mention because last year I was on the record just hating this team. And I mentioned multiple times that it was just a team full of third liners, and like I don't know how that's going to work out, because how are they going to score goals? I was semi-right about all that.
Semi-right,
Semi-right, I'll say. And yeah, like you said, they picked up two guys who can score goals, Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky. That's exactly what they needed to hit on. They also hit on the draft, and they've got a few young players that are cracking the lineup here, and it's going to be exciting. Wright and Benier down the middle. Yes, please. Yeah. I'm in on that. Let's see what they can do together. They sound like best of buds already. He was the first guy to reach out to Wright once he got drafted. That's the word.
That's the word.
Yeah, so I like this team a lot better. Burakovsky, like, give that guy first line time along with Bjorkstrand. Let's see how many goals they both score together. I think that's kind of what they were missing. We talked about, guys that need to be given a chance on one of these new teams. And I said last year, it's not really any of these guys that I was interested in that happening with, but Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky, give them a lot of minutes. We'll see what they can do. Bjorkstrand, 30 goal scorer. He had 28 last year, but he can be a 30 goal scorer. So I'm excited for Seattle. I don't know if they're a playoff team yet. Maybe the only way they're a playoff team is because they're in the West and in a very shitty division.
I was going to say not only the West, but the Pacific, which is the worst division in hockey right now.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you that. Do you think they're a playoff team? You're saying you're not so sure. I'm not going to say anything quite yet. How about that?
Okay, good. Because you start looking on the D end and in that, and then you get questioning.
Yeah, there's, goaltending for this team leaves a lot to be desired because, like we've talked about, you don't really know how these goalies are going to perform. Last year was certainly, tough year for everybody who played for the team, but especially the goalies. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But come time where we go through our, standings predictions for each division, don't be surprised if I have this team making the playoffs again if they get average goaltending. So I'll say that. But I like the moves overall this offseason. Any other teams, Case, that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I've got one more winner that is going to make maybe a quarter of our listening base very happy. That's the Ottawa Senators.
Yes.
Obviously, they've had a good offseason. You got to love the DeBrincat trade for 7 overall, 39 overall, and a third round in 2024. I thought that DeBrincat's price was going to be way more than that from what we were hearing about it. So I think that's a steal for a 40-goal scorer who is going to absolutely light it up in his top 6, especially when he's getting a good look with Timmy Stu and maybe Giroux. So I really love that. Again, there's another one, Giroux. I said it. That's a great signing for them. That's that leadership role. That's that top 6 winger they're looking for, a hometown guy. I have to love it. And then they upgraded the goaltending on top of all this. Got rid of Matt Murray's contract and brought in Cam Talbot to instantly be better on goaltending. They did get rid of Philip Gustafsson, who was kind of their young guy, but they've got another one in the making in Mats Sjogard. So I don't think that they're worried at all about getting rid of some youth in goaltending. And now they have kind of a 1A, 1B situation going on in Ottawa because their guy there, Forsberg. Yeah. I kind of want to say Forsberg. Yeah. He was pretty good for them last year. So I like their situation. And then they locked up Norris, their number 1C, for 8 years, $7.95 million. They're going to love that contract in a couple of years. I'm guaranteeing that. So their top 6 is what we said they needed to improve. And boy, did they ever. Now they have that one solidified line that every team needs that clicks really well together in Kachuk, Norris, and Batherson. And then their second line in DeBrincat, Timmy Stu, and Claude Giroux. You gotta love that.
Yeah, their top 6 certainly improved. They've got fairly decent depth. They lost Connor Brown, right? He go to Washington, right?
Yeah.
And so they aren't incredibly deep, but solidifying that top 6 for the foreseeable future, and then having guys come in on the back end that are going to be able to take a step, whether it's this year or in a couple years. Guys like Jake Sanderson and Jacob Bernard Docker, and those guys are the future. Maybe it's a Brandstrom or a Lassie Thompson or whoever. These guys are going to be up and coming, and this team is on the up and up. Like basically the bottom 4 teams in the Atlantic. They're all on the up and up, and I'm excited to see what they do this offseason. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they're a winner in my opinion, just because I thought Seattle's offseason was better, and another team who I'm going to mention here, I thought it was a bit better, but Ottawa's definitely up there, and they've improved a lot. I'll say this, though. I've seen a lot of comments already, whether it's on Instagram posts or like tweets that have found their way through the grapevine to me because I don't have Twitter. But Ottawa fans, I know you're excited. This is a good team now. Good top 6, okay? Just relax. Enjoy it. They're not supposed to be, they're cup contenders yet. They might not even be a playoff team, okay? They're good enough, and they're going to get better, but just relax, because I've seen some wild comments talking about the Sens having a top 5, top 6 in the NHL, and it's just not true yet. It's not true. You've got good players in the top 6, but, Timmy Stützle still needs to develop. I'd like to see him become, a point per game player. I think he's roughly about a 60-point guy now. He's going to get better. Josh Norris, like you said, you're going to love that contract in 2-3 years. He's going to be well worth the price. But right now, very good, but there's still a bit to be desired, and you can see that in these players. Even a guy like Kachuk, he gets a ton of shots on goals. He plays with heart. He fights, he hits, etc. But, you could see that player in the future getting more points. So this is a PSA to Ottawa fans. Your team's good, and it's going to be in the future as well. Just relax for now. Just enjoy the ride. So I'll say that about the Senators.
You're in a tough division and an even tougher conference. So set your expectations.
Exactly. Okay, last team that I wanted to mention here as one of the winners of the offseason, in my opinion, and maybe a bit controversial depending on how you look at it, but I'm going to say the Carolina Hurricanes. I think there's no question that they got better up front, even after losing a guy like Niederreiter, because they acquired Max Pacioretty for free from the Vegas Golden Knights, literally for future considerations, because he makes $7 million, and Vegas said, no, we're going to sign the center and Riley Smith for 5 times 3 instead of keeping Max Pacioretty around. So Carolina.
See, you got a point per game player. Point per game rental player is only for 1 year at $7 million.
Yeah,
for free.
Totally
That's
free.
Usually a first round pick at the trade deadline.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Brandon Hagel, for example, not a point per game player, has never been in his career, and he's young. He's very young and on a good contract. He fetched 2 first round picks and 2 B-level prospects. So to get Pacioretty for free is an absolute steal.
Not a rental. So it's
fair enough.
I'll say it's,
you're buying the years. You're buying the contract.
You're talking apples to apples, but it's like Gallas to Macintosh here.
I get it now. Yeah,
there you go.
That took me a sec. I thought you were talking about computers for a sec, but no. So it's you know what I mean though. This is incredible value for a player just because Vegas said, you know what, we're okay with losing guys, and like we said earlier, NHL players are catching on to that, and there's been some rumors floating around that guys don't want to play in Vegas, and no kidding. So that was the one thing they did. They also brought in Ondrej Kase, and Kase was offered the exact same deal from the Maple Leafs, 1 year, $1.5 million, and Kase decided to go to the Carolina Hurricanes. When this player is healthy, he can easily be a top 6 player. I would categorize him as a middle 6 player, though. Offensively minded, can score goals, plays with a bit of an edge, fairly smart, isn't terrible on defense, and an incredibly cheap contract, so I really liked that. The third thing they did was they acquired Brent Burns. Yeah, ever heard of him? Brent Burns, one of the highest paid defensemen in the NHL. Thing is, they got his salary retained by a bit, not quite 50%. I think they got it at 25 or something like that. But essentially for free, just because San Jose wanted to get money off the books. I think it was like a 3rd round pick and a couple guys, nobody notable and nobody signed even. So basically, again, for nothing, and that's Carolina seeking value in the players that they get.
You just got to love when a GM can pick out two teams that are in cap hell and expose them and relatively low value going the other way for some big pieces and, just kind of working the cap. And I really like that. And yeah, it's also not to get away. We'll come back to Burns here, but there's something to be said about knowing when to walk away from a player too. And they did that in, Niederreiter. I don't think they're comfortable with paying him $4 million, and I don't know if I am or not. So it's like, you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them and know when to walk away. And this was certainly a case, and I think that Columbus or Carolina, is certainly a winner here, because I don't think that their top six got any worse in losing Niederreiter. Their back end is still one of those back ends we're going to be talking about when it comes to the beginning of the season and our rankings. And this team is still scary to play against. So talk about Brent Burns.
Yeah,
slotting in.
So Brent Burns, man, going to Carolina here. Coming off a season where I don't know exactly how much he played, but he was relied on heavily in San Jose. I would imagine Burns is going to play top pairing minutes in Carolina, whether he's on the first or second pair here. I would expect him to play, between 18 and 21 minutes a night, roughly. And he's going to be an impact player and on an offensive-minded team like Carolina, who's going to be at the top of the standings like they have been for the past, half decade. Brent Burns, watch out. Fantasy players here, watch out. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this because, I've got my fantasy shirt on and I won the fantasy league last year, but he's going to be an important fantasy player, and you're going to get him relatively late because of his stats last season. So watch out for him. He's going to replace Tony DeAngelo's scoring in Carolina, and I think it's a perfect fit for the team.
Yeah, you pair him up with maybe one of the best defensive defenseman. I'm not saying he's a defensive defenseman, but he plays maybe some of the best defense as Jacob Slavin. So
that's right.
Pair those two up together. Let Brent Burns get creative again and be a twinger again, and it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and here's the final thing I'll say about Carolina, and I guess for this episode in general, the only reason I didn't have Carolina, number one in my off-season winners is because they've still got a bit of work to do. They've still got to sign Martin Necas and Ethan Bear, and I think they've got just over $4 million to do that. And I don't know, depending on term, maybe that costs you more than $4 million. Maybe they have to move some money around. What's happening with Jake Gardiner? He missed all last season. He makes about over $4 million. So there's more work to be done. But as of right now, I think Carolina's had a pretty good offseason, and look for them to be right at the top of the standings again, just like they have been for the last few years. Okay. Anything else to add for this winners and losers episode, or just winners? I suppose?
There's two teams I want to talk about quickly because I'm so confused and I don't know if they've won or lost. And one of them I don't think we'll know for maybe another 2 years. But I want your opinion on. Let's first talk about the Detroit Red Wings. So I'm going to name off a couple moves here. They traded a third for Husso and then signed him for $4.75 million for 3 years. They picked up Kopp for 5 years at $5.625 million. Mata at 1 year, $2.25 million. Sherratt, 4 years, $4.75 million. Kubalik at 2.5 for 2 years. Very good.
Yep.
And Perron for 2 years. I think it's also around $2.5 million. I gotta double check that one.
I think it's or
$4.5 million.
Yeah. Love that deal. Love that deal for Perron.
I don't know what I'm thinking here. Do I like this or do I not? I think I like it at face value, but when I start diving into some of these contracts, I get a little scared here.
I'll say this about Detroit. They definitely got better on paper and on the ice. I'll say that. But in terms of value and these value adds, this isn't characteristic of Stevie Y, because Husso paying a third, first of all, to get RFA rights, then to just re-sign him, and to overpay him at that, in my opinion, 4.75 times 3 years. Not saying he wasn't really good last year. He was one of the better analytic goalies in the league for a large portion of the season. But then we saw him lose the crease in the playoffs back to Binnington, and he wasn't very good then. And we know goalies are voodoo, so in my opinion, that's an overpayment for him. You look at Ben Sherratt. In my opinion, I think that's an overpayment for him, despite the fact that he makes their blue line better by being a reliable defender out there. We look at Perron and Kubalik, two deals that I do really like, and I think they make total sense to add to the scoring depth on this team. And Kopp. Kopp, to me, is the worst one. I think that is an overpayment that's going to age way more poorly than even the other two that I mentioned because of the physical style that he plays. I think you're looking at overpayment by at least 1.5 per year. But all of that being said, they're better on the ice and they're going to compete for a playoff spot. So you can talk about, value all you want and getting the most out of players in terms of signing free agents or whatever, because Stevie Y has typically been a guy who manages assets better than anyone else in the league, or he's at least been, top 3 in that respect among GMs. But at a certain point, your team has to compete. And if that takes 1 or 2 overpayments, maybe that's what it takes.
So, I like Andrew Kopp. I like the way he plays.
So
I love
do I.
David Perron. He's sneaky good top 6 winger. And then in the playoffs, he's like a first line winger for some reason.
Yeah.
So I like these signings. But the things that scare me is next year, you got to sign Dylan Larkin. You got to sign Tyler Bertuzzi. You got to sign Puis Suter. It's like there's a lot coming up here. And then in 2 years, you got to sign Lucas Raymond and Mo Seider.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's going to become of these contracts? Do you know what this team is starting to smell like to me? Is the Edmonton Oilers. Mm-hmm. It's a team full of around $5 million contracts. And then you'll be paying 2 superstars around, 12 and 10.
Yeah.
Which
I could see.
Seider, 12 million. I'd give it to him right now. Yeah. If I was him, 8 million, 12 years, or 8 years, 12 million. The other way it would have been a lot better.
Yeah, 12 times 12. How about?
Yeah. So it's going to get scary in the future, and that's a lot of money that they got to dish out. What's Dylan Larkin going to be making? What does Tyler Bertuzzi make?
I think Bertuzzi's time in Detroit is kind of coming to an end, and I think that was made clear when, first of all, when Mantha was traded, right? That kind of sent the message that no one who's a part of this younger-ish core that never really made a huge impact, no one's safe, right? Like even a guy like Dylan Larkin, I don't think he's safe. And Bertuzzi, I think Yzerman and company sees him kind of on the periphery of this core now, especially that you have guys like Raymond and Vrana as a part of the core. So I don't know. I think Bertuzzi, I'm not too worried about. Larkin, though, I think they probably want to keep because he's their guy. He's their captain. He's more than just a player. He's a locker room presence, etc. So I agree. It's going to get scary in a few years. But I'll also say this, not just about Detroit, but about kind of every team in the league, who has been handing out big contracts so far. And I've said this to you and Harp in the group chat. I think the NHL GMs know something that the public doesn't quite yet about the salary cap in the coming years. I think they've been told a rough estimate of the number and how much it's going to go up in the next couple years because there's been a ton of money handed out. And if the cap stays flat, that's brutal for a team like Detroit who overpaid 3 guys. But if the cap goes up by, 10 million in the next 3 years, which it seems like it's going to, given how there was record revenue in the NHL this year. So once the whole escrow thing is figured out between the players and the owners or whatever, once that's figured out, you can expect the cap to skyrocket. I have a feeling, and this is just pure speculation, just based on the amount of pure dollars given out in free agency this year. I have a feeling that GMs have been told that the number is going to skyrocket and that they will be able to afford a few overpayments in the coming years.
Yeah, in 2 years, we're going to have to be looking back at it and doing it as a percent of cap. That's the only way we can look at these salaries in 2 years, especially if it's going to go up quite a bit. And I really hope it does. And I really expect it to after these last couple of years of revenue. And I think another one coming in here, another big season ahead. So, yeah, I think there's got to be something happening. And last thing on Detroit.
Yeah.
I trust Stevie Y.
Same.
That's where I lay here. Like, so in my mind, after saying that, they're a winner.
Yeah.
Last comment.
Yep. Go ahead.
No, you.
Okay. Last comment on it about Stevie Y. The fact that you brought that up. How you trust him. I saw a few takes on Instagram on the day that all of these deals got done. I believe it was the 13th. Was it the 13th that the offseason opened up? Anyways, and a ton of deals were made. I saw a few comments from a few analytics accounts that I follow saying, July 13th will be remembered as the day that the analytics community gave up on Steve Yzerman because of some of the bad deals that were made. And I think that's hyperbole. You can't say that yet because I'm with you, man. I trust him. He's not only an analytics focused GM, but he's also a guy who's played the game and knows what it takes to win. So we'll see how these deals turn out, and we'll see if the cap goes up, because I think that's definitely going to help him in the coming years.
Okay, my second team that I just wanted to ask you quick opinion on, and we talked briefly before this about them, is the New York Rangers. I stumbled across a post that showed their additions and subtractions this offseason, and the post said, "Are they now a cup contender?" And I looked at it and I went, I don't know. Did they get better? Did they get worse? I don't know what the New York Rangers did in this offseason. When I look at it quickly, they lost Strome, Kopp, Mott, Rooney, Trano, Braun, Georgiev, and they got Halak, Trocheck, and Carpenter. Re-signed a couple guys, obviously. Yeah. But I just really don't know if this team got any better.
So you want my opinion?
Yeah.
I think they got worse. I really do. I think there's a lot of names there who are impact players. Me saying they got worse doesn't necessarily mean that I think they made the wrong moves. I prefer that they don't overpay guys like Kopp and Vetrano, who got overpaid in their respective places. At a certain point, like, you just can't keep everybody. And they were rentals. Kopp was a rental anyway. So it was like, you can't expect them to keep everybody. I think they got worse for a backup goalie as well. I do like adding Trocheck, but I think just overall, you've got some regression candidates, including Igor Shesterkin, who I know had an incredible year, MVP caliber year. If he won it over Matthews this year, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I would have said well-deserved, because that was the best goaltending season, like collective season, that we've seen put together since Carey Price won the MVP. And I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, but he's going to be a regression candidate this year, because how can you maintain that or go up? Like, I think it's kind of unlikely. And another regression candidate is going to be Chris Kreider, who scored 52 goals or something, and half of them were on the power play. Like, there's not a chance he repeats that. Losing Strome, I think, is you can argue that Strome was never a top line center or whatever, and you got Trocheck to replace him, so you can say that's a wash. But I don't know, just changing things up right there, it's never, you never really know exactly what's going to happen. So personally, I think the Rangers were pretenders in the first place, and I've spoken my mind about this. I think they just had a couple incredible years from guys like Kreider and Shesterkin. But I think in general, they're not going to be as good. I think they're still pretenders, and even worse ones at that.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is that through no moves at all, their back end has gotten better. They're a year older, 100%. And this back end is going to be very good for years to come now. But yeah, I don't think that they got better as a whole. And I'm not just saying that because I hate their guts. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that they got any better. That being said, I think that there could be one last trade to happen that blows our mind, like Kachuk and Huberdeau, and that's Patty Kane possibly coming to the Rangers. That would change everything for me. We'll see how much they're willing to give up on for him. And if that happens at all, you never know. So that could be interesting. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the Rangers because I saw that post and it was like, are they cup contenders now? It's like, well, no, I think they might have gotten a little worse.
See, like the more I think about it too, like that comment you made about their back end, how they got better even after not adding anybody because they're just a year older. Like a guy like Condre Miller will be even better next season.
Schneider.
Braden Schneider, forgot about him. What a
Adam
player.
Fox, still a young guy.
Yeah, and one of the best defensemen in the league already.
Yeah.
But the same can be said about their forward group. Lafreniere and Kakko, say what you want about them. They had really good playoffs, the two of them. And with Philip Hedl as the third guy on that line. And Hedl, he's sticking around for a while. Lafreniere, he was probably the second best player on that line and expect him to play more of a role this year. And then Kakko, he's coming along too. These players don't play often. And I don't know how many times I've mentioned this. They don't play as much as they should, both playing about 13 to 14 minutes a night on a daily basis, which is a joke for a first and second overall pick. They haven't been put in favorable positions to succeed, but yeah, I don't know, man. I still don't think the Rangers are that good, but if those guys start clicking and then that becomes, consistent depth scoring and their back end is better and Shesterkin keeps it up, who knows? They could be contenders.
Yeah.
They're a playoff team for sure.
Last two teams, it's gonna be like a 2 or 3 liner that I want to mention here as losers, and then I'm done. Very quickly is the Chicago Blackhawks. Mm-hmm. Kind of alienated Patrick Kane and Taves. They're the last guys on this team. Got rid of a lot of pieces and not a ton in return. And now they've become last chance U, where a bunch of players are kind of signing there because they know they're going to get playing time and try to turn things around. And like Domi and Athanasiou and I don't know. There's another one, Tyler Johnson, but he was already there.
Yeah. It's
like I'm interested to see what these guys can do with more minutes, but it's obviously just going to be like another Arizona Coyotes type team.
And they're probably getting flipped at the deadline anyway. Like a guy like Domi, he's probably flipped again.
Yeah, and then like the change in direction and saying they want to change South Jones, it all looks so bad.
Yeah.
The second team, Philadelphia Flyers. They just really didn't do anything. The moves last year put them in a position where they didn't even reach out to Johnny Gaudreau, who wanted to play for them. Johnny Gaudreau said he wanted to play for Philadelphia, but they didn't even reach out to him. The fact that they couldn't move some cap to sign him and drastically turn things around makes them major losers in my mind. Totally
agree. Only thing I'll say about the Flyers is that, well, I guess I'll just say, did you see the quote, the Chuck Fletcher quote? So he was asked in a media circle, why didn't you make an offer to Gaudreau, or like kind of what happened there? And he was like, well, to get something like that done, we would have had to move a lot of cap space, which would have been, a few players, and that would have been tough, or that would have been difficult. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, Chuck Fletcher, that's your job, dude. Your job is to make tough decisions and to make it work, especially when you have a literal franchise-changing player, 100-point player in Johnny Gaudreau, who wants to play for you and would likely have left money on the table to play for you so he could be close to his family. Like, they had it in their laps and completely dropped the ball. Like, what a poorly run organization from top to bottom, and throw the Blackhawks in there now as well.
Yeah, no, Philly, like, they improved their back end. Still don't know about it. I just don't love the team, really, and their goaltending is the biggest question mark there is. So I wish that they would have made some more moves so that they can continue to stay relevant in the Metro, but this team is kind of earmarked for the bottom in my mind.
Who's their backup this year? Because they had Jones, right? Do you know who their backup is going into this season? So many goalies on the
Felix Sandstrom.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
I've never even heard of him. I'm not gonna lie. So many goalies have moved around this offseason already, so I'm kind of just like, who plays for who? Like, I forgot that Kemper played. I forgot that Kemper signed with Washington the other day. I was like, oh, if they lost Samsonov and Vanacek, who's going to play for them? And it's like, oh yeah, Kemper. Yeah.
Felix Sandstrom had a 902 in 44 games in the AHL last year.
Wow.
He is our age at 25.
Okay. Well, good luck to him. Good luck to the Flyers. And good luck to Anthony DeAngelo having Torts as your coach.
He loves him.
I know. I saw the quote. Torts is
DeAngelo's biggest fan, and all of the comments are like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah, just wait, though. Just wait. He'll do something stupid, and Torts will let him know. And I know that that's what the quote was. He was like, is he going to do stupid shit? Yes, but he's a hell of a player. I get that, but I don't know. Torts is probably going to eat his words halfway through the season when DeAngelo's rushing up the ice every play, because he's like, why the fuck would I play defense on the Flyers? But anyway, anything else to add, Case?
That's it.
Yeah, we've gone a bit long this episode, so we might as well wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for listening to episode 134 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. And actually, Case, one more thing before we sign off. I meant to do this. I meant to ask you the grade, going all the way back to the Kachuk trade for Huberdeau. What grade do you give both teams, just very quickly? That's all I need.
A B- for the Florida Panthers. No, a B for the Florida Panthers and an A on the dot for the Calgary Flames.
Okay. I gave Florida a B-, like you had, before he changed to a B. And then Calgary gave him an A+. So I was a bit on the extreme there. You kind of met me in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's sandbagging a little.
Yeah. Okay, let's do this again. Thank you very much for listening to episode 134 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Have a good night.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.